Great Western Railway 280 tank engine Goliath number 5239 powers under the ex-North Taunton footbridge into the very attractive Ropley Station on the Watercress Railway in Hampshire. There are many buildings and structures of great interest at Ropley, but today we are looking at just one in particular. That is the waiting shelter on Platform 1. This series of photographs document the design and building of the waiting room on the up platform at Ropley Station. On all the stations, up refers to the normally London-bound platform and down to the country-bound platform. Many visitors to the railway today look at the waiting shelter and think it must have been there an awfully long time. Actually, it's relatively new. There was a very basic wooden waiting room originally on this site, but that was demolished before the Second World War by the then Southern Railway, when the passing loop and signal box were taken out and this platform fell into disuse. The platform was only reinstated when the present Mid-Hants Railway opened in 1977. For many years there was a need to provide covered accommodation for the customers of the railway waiting for their trains on the platform, as it can be rather bleak, particularly on a winter's day. This is a similar angled photograph taken before any other work started. As you can see, there was only a small ticket collection booth and a bench, and that's all that was there. The small ticket office wasn't to survive. Although it looked good in these pictures, it was actually quite rotten, couldn't be saved, and was unfortunately demolished as part of the site clearance when the project started. In the autumn of 2013, the work started. The area was fenced off and cleared in preparation for the contractors to start work. Here you can see the contractors, Crouch and McAlpine Limited, digging out the chalk bank and trenches for the foundations. Over 70 cubic metres of chalk were dug out to make the site suitable. The contractors completed all the groundworks, including the brick sleeper walls, the service ducts, tarmac, and installing the cast iron columns which came from the old Ringwood station. It was vitally important that all the columns were plumb, level and in line. By February 2014, the contractors had finished, leaving the site ready for all other work to be carried out by Watercress Line Building Department volunteers. The building was designed by the volunteers to be in the style of the old London and South Western Railway, to complement the station buildings on the opposite platform. The timber sleeper wall and damp-proof course were installed, again making sure that everything was straight and level. At the Medstead workshop, the main trusses were built. These were really heavy. The steel plates holding them together had been laser cut for accuracy, galvanised, and then treated with mordant solution so they could later be painted. The trusses were then given a coat of aluminium primer. This would ensure long-lasting protection in the future. All the individual panels were also constructed at Medstead. They had to be the right size so that they could fit within railway gauge to be taken by train down to Ropley. There was quite a lot of them, and they were all loaded using the Atlas crane. Once secured, they were all taken down to Ropley, pulled by the Class 37 diesel D6836. The train was greeted at Ropley by the volunteers of the building department, who were quite keen to get it all offloaded and into place where the shelter would be, and covered up against the weather, ready for work to start eventually, when they were to be assembled. Careful planning was done to make sure that the panels on the top were the ones that were needed first, and the panels at the bottom were the ones that were needed last. This might not sound that important, but they were cumbersome and heavy, and we didn't want to be moving them all about to get to the one we needed if it was at the bottom. It was a welcome sight when eventually the Atlas was empty and all the panels were safely under cover. Everybody celebrated by moving over to the platform on the other side, where there was ample tea and biscuits waiting. Now the real work started. The gang assembled all the panels one by one, being very careful that they all lined up properly and that they were all in the right place. Amazingly enough, they did fit, well, with only a few minor adjustments. It took a good while to do all this, but eventually the bulk of it was up and the rafters got fitted, which was good, because until they were installed it would be quite possible that strong winds could have put everything back on the floor again. The main trusses were lifted into position on top of the cast iron columns, again with the help of the Atlas crane. This was quite a difficult operation, because each truss must weigh over half a ton, and it's pretty high in the air, so everybody was extremely careful. We didn't want any of those falling on top of anybody, but everything was done professionally and carefully, and eventually they were all in place. The view from the yard was changing week by week. With every effort, a little more was put in place. At this stage, the rafters were going into place, and it was really starting to look like a building now. You can see the main station building on the platform on the other side of the tracks. The boarding was going up on the roof very well. Painting underneath was a little awkward, as after a while the paint used to run down the paintbrush, down your arm, and drip off your elbow and onto your boots. Well, that's all part of the fun. With the roof in place, it became so much easier to store things in the dry. The yellow items you can see stacked up are all the dragon's teeth that would eventually hang around the edge of the roof. There are a lot of these, and they're all made in the Madstead workshop, all cut out by hand, aluminium primed, undercoated and ready to go on later. A lot of work there. It's now June 2016. We've gone from being wet and cold to hot in the blistering sun. This view, taken from the engineering works, shows the slates being fitted. These are Spanish slate. Unfortunately, the cost of Welsh slate would have been far too prohibitive, but these are very good quality and they look right as well. You can also see some of those dragon's teeth being fitted along the front of the canopy. With the slating of the roof completed, we could now start moving on to the timber cladding. All the cladding timber was aluminium primed and undercoated at Medstead and then transported to Ropley. This made control of the paint a lot easier, as there was limited resources at Ropley to make sure that the painting was completed in the dry. As the cladding continued, window frames were also fitted. These original pattern sash windows were all bespoke made with the correct cast iron counterweights and brass fittings to be as authentic as possible. The project was receiving quite a lot of attention now from passengers and visitors alike, so a board was put up outside explaining all about it and what it would look like when it was finished. At this stage, all the dragon's teeth are installed along the front, and it's coming along very nicely. An unusual viewpoint, this one, taken from the roof of the signal box. I was up there doing some repairs, and this just happened to come along nicely. Lord Nelson, 850, framed by the famous topiary at Ropley, with the half-completed waiting room in the distance, looking really good. Another view from the engineering workshops, with the perfectly maintained topiary in front. The almost endless work continued. An original tortoise stove was obtained, and once overhauled, it was installed inside the waiting room, and here we can also see the flue being fitted through the roof to the outside. With the dragon's teeth now fully installed and the guttering and downpipes installed as well, it was time to apply the top coat of paint. To ensure that we were using authentic colours, the Dulux Weather Shield paint was mixed by the supplier to a particular colour specification code. With the structural work completed, we now turned to fitting out the inside. This included electrical wiring and lighting using period lamps, hanging an enamel platform 1 sign, a Ropley totem sign, a fingerboard holder, a waste paper bin, as well as adding various posters to the walls. An iron fire surround was made from scratch at the Medstead workshop and was fitted to prevent anybody accidentally touching the hot tortoise stove. The inside of the waiting room was now essentially complete, with fire extinguishers, loudspeaker, posters on the wall, and a nice London and South Western Railway clock fitted above the end window. Finishing touches to the covered waiting area included red fire buckets, an original railway bench, and a lovely double-faced John Walker clock, which had originally come from Aldershot Station. Poster boards to the correct British Railways design were made and installed along with various posters and enamel signs. You can also see the newly constructed box of destination fingerboards. In 2015, the whole project was complete and ready for passengers and visitors alike to enjoy. The waiting room shelter was fortunate to win a National Railway Heritage Award, and a plaque was unveiled on the 2nd of June 2016. We hope you have enjoyed this adventure. Be sure to visit the railway soon and stop off at Ropley to have a closer look at the waiting room on Platform 1.